I'm Aubrey Vance, a 28-year-old senior financial analyst from Dallas, Texas, and I've spent my entire adult life trying to buy my way out of my family's chaos. But nothing could have prepared me for the night my sister tried to physically beat me out of it. It was a tense Sunday dinner, one of the mandatory trips back home to St. Louis, Missouri. The air was thick with unsaid grievances, but the conversation had been civil if strained. Until I said the single word, no. My sister Bryn immediately stopped eating, her eyes turning cold and dangerous. She stood up so fast her chair screeched backward. You said no to $40,000 after everything Mom and Dad did for you. She didn't wait for my answer. She slammed her fist on the antique dining table so hard the plates jumped. She marched straight into the storage room off the kitchen and came back with a heavy aluminum baseball bat, the one my dad Keith used to keep in the shop. You think you're so high and mighty, Aubrey? She screamed, her face flushed with fury. She raised the bat and swung it wildly, not at me, but at the empty space beside my head, shattering a decorative ceramic vase. My boyfriend Adam instantly pulled me back, shouting something I couldn't hear over the ringing in my ears. I stumbled backward, watching in stunned silence, as Bryn swung again, the bat hitting the back of my chair and sending splinters across the room. But the real shock wasn't the violence. It was watching my mother Janice rush forward, not to restrain Bryn, but to gently push Adam away from the action. And my father Keith, he just stood there leaning against the doorframe, sighing deeply as if I was the dramatic one. It was right then, as the bat ripped through the antique dining rug and my family remained complicit, that I stopped feeling fear and started feeling pure, focused rage. They were enabling her, letting her try to destroy me right in front of the only person who cared. They'd soon find out what a real cutoff looked like. If you've ever been the victim of blatant favoritism or emotional abuse, you understand the feeling of being betrayed by your own blood. Share your story in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of my story and how I finally cut off the family who took advantage of me, forcing them to face the real-world consequences of their silence. To understand why Bryn grabbed that bat that night, we must go back 15 years, when I first realized my place in the Vance hierarchy. Our family business, Vance Antique and Restoration Shop in St. Louis, Missouri, wasn't some charming, profitable heritage. It was a dusty, cold, and financially draining obligation. The air always smelled of ancient wood lacquer and despair. My father, Keith Vance, inherited it from his own distant uncle, but he lacked the business acumen to run it. He was a good restorer, meticulous with the varnish, but terrible with invoices. And my mother, Janice Vance, she spent her energy focused on one thing: nurturing my older sister Bryn. Bryn, 9 years my senior, was the golden child. She was deemed the artist, the free spirit, the one whose brilliance was too fragile for the mundane world of bookkeeping and bills. While other kids my age were playing outside, Aubrey was sitting at a massive mahogany desk in the back of the shop, squinting at heavy ledger books. By age 13, I wasn't just doing homework. I was running the inventory system, reconciling bank statements, and quietly flagging the looming tax deadlines that my father conveniently ignored. My mother Janice always praised my gift for numbers, not because it was an achievement, but because it saved them the cost of an accountant. Bryn's artistic temperament usually manifested as dramatic outbursts and impulsive behavior, which my parents consistently excused as passion. I remember one incident clearly: Bryn attempting to modernize a priceless century-old carved wooden lion accidentally dropped a can of paint thinner, permanently staining the piece. It was a several $1,000 loss, money the shop desperately needed. Bryn received a gentle hug and a calming lecture about artistic caution. I, on the other hand, was tasked with figuring out how to reclassify the loss on the books to avoid raising my father's already high blood pressure. The unspoken agreement in the Vance household was always clear: Bryn takes and Aubrey provides. She was enrolled in expensive summer art camps. I received an extra calculator for Christmas. She got a monthly allowance for creative inspiration. I got to keep the change from the deposit runs. The sheer weight of that responsibility settled onto my young shoulders, forcing me to grow up fast. I internalized the message that my value wasn't in my dreams but in my utility, as the family's invisible financial foundation. They never said they loved me more for my money sense, but they certainly needed me more. As high school graduation approached, the pressure intensified. The shop's profit margins were thinner than ever, and my father, Keith, was already talking about retirement. I poured myself into my studies not out of passion for finance, but out of a desperate need for escape. I knew the only way out of that dusty shop and the heavy expectations was through a full-ride scholarship. I applied to schools across the country, aiming for the furthest coast I could manage. When the acceptance letter from a prestigious university in Texas arrived, offering a full academic scholarship, my parents' reaction wasn't joy or pride. Instead, I remember my mother, Janice, looking at the dollar value of the scholarship, which would save her from paying for my college, and saying, "This is wonderful, Aubrey. Now you can concentrate on getting a high-paying job right after graduation. Bryn's tuition for that studio apartment in New York City is going to be due soon." I was finally free, but the financial leash I realized then had simply gotten longer, not broken. Even though I had moved to Dallas, Texas and started working, I couldn't truly escape my familial obligations to St. Louis. The scholarship had been my physical key out of the antique shop, but my successful career quickly became the golden handcuffs keeping me shackled. I graduated top of my class and secured a position as a senior financial analyst at a major corporation. My salary quickly climbed into the highly competitive six-figure range, a fact I was always careful not to boast about, but which my parents, Keith and Janice, knew instantly. They had, after all, insisted on managing my personal emergency savings account, for me citing my busy schedule as the reason. They said it was safer with them, and naive me, I agreed. The long-distance calls began immediately after my first paycheck. They rarely started with, "How are you?" Instead, they usually started with, "Aubrey, honey, your father had to dip into the emergency fund this month." Or, "Bryn needs you to wire some money for her new studio. Her artistic flow is being disrupted by a cramped space." My sister Bryn, who was 9 years older and still living the life of a perpetually struggling artist in various trendy but unaffordable areas, was the primary drain. She had never held a stable job for more than 3 months, claiming the corporate world stifled her soul. Her projects were vague, expensive, and always funded by me. I was the silent partner in her self-proclaimed art career. I sent a fixed, non-negotiable monthly allowance enough to cover Bryn's basic rent and utilities, plus an extra cushion for the shop's operational costs. It was a significant amount, but I told myself it was the price of peace, the cost of keeping them away from my successful life in Texas. Whenever I did visit the obligatory holiday trips or mandatory birthdays, Bryn's resentment was palpable. She saw my success not as my hard-won achievement, but as a personal insult, a judgment on her own lack of drive. During one dinner, Bryn openly mocked my profession. "Oh, Aubrey's still playing with those boring spreadsheets," Bryn said, sipping an expensive glass of wine she certainly hadn't paid for. "I'm busy dealing with real emotions and the human condition. You're just counting. It's called financial stability." "Bryn, something you might want to look up?" I retorted, tired of her constant sneering. My mother Janice would instantly jump in. "Now, Aubrey, don't be harsh. Bryn is sensitive. She's following her passion. Not everyone can be a number cruncher like you." This subtle, passive-aggressive belittling was their constant tool. They would use Bryn's supposed artistic brilliance to shame my practical success, subtly reinforcing the idea that my money was tainted by corporate greed, but conveniently essential for Bryn's pure art. This was the dynamic I lived with for 5 long years after college. I provided the income, and they provided the emotional exhaustion. I tried to establish boundaries, asking my mother to stop calling me for every minor financial emergency. The results were disastrous. Janice would resort to her signature move, the guilt trip. Your father and I are getting older, Aubrey. We only have this little shop. If you can't help your sister, who will? She needs you. The sheer force of their emotional manipulation always wore me down, and I'd end up sending extra funds just to stop the persistent, agonizing phone calls. I was paying to be financially drained and emotionally broken all at once. The $40,000 I was now saving my down payment fund felt like the last fortress I had left to protect. 2 years into my role as a senior financial analyst, I met Adam Cole during a mandatory professional development seminar. He was a software designer, analytical, and grounded the absolute antithesis of my family's chaotic, emotionally charged world. Adam was the first person who saw me as Aubrey, not as the family's ATM or the utility player. He recognized the ambition and the sheer effort behind my success, and he never once judged me for the six-figure salary that my sister Bryn constantly scorned. When I explained the dynamic with my family, the constant need to provide the emotional blackmail, Adam was supportive yet clear. He saw the situation for what it was: blatant exploitation. We quickly became inseparable. Adam brought a sense of stability and normalcy that I desperately craved. We started making plans for our future, specifically buying our first home. This was my ultimate escape plan, the tangible proof that I had built a life separate from the dusty antique shop in St. Louis. I had been saving diligently, funneling every spare dollar into the emergency account held by my mother, Janice Vance. That account, which was supposed to be a joint emergency fund, was now housing a solid $40,000, the exact amount we needed for a down payment on a decent property in the Dallas area. Adam's presence immediately caused friction with my family. During his first and only visit to St. Louis, my mother Janice treated him with polite, unsettling coolness. My father Keith kept making pointed comments about Adam's unnecessarily clean shoes and his corporate rigidity. They preferred Bryn's partners, a series of unemployed musicians and abstract photographers, because those men posed no threat to their control over my life. Adam represented an outside force, a powerful gravitational pull that might finally drag me out of their orbit. He's too simple, Aubrey, Bryn told me privately, narrowing her eyes. He doesn't understand the depth of our family history. He's just a number. The opposition intensified when Adam and I started looking at properties. My commitment to him felt like a final act of rebellion against my family's unspoken rule: you belong to us. Then the true financial threat began. Bryn suddenly announced her latest artistic vision, a sophisticated, fully virtual art gallery showcasing her portfolio. This venture, she claimed, required a massive upfront investment to secure the domain, hire web developers, and rent a temporary curatorial studio. "It's my breakthrough, Aubrey," Bryn declared over the phone, her voice dripping with self-importance. "This will put me on the map. I need capital. I need my seed money." Wait. When I asked exactly how much seed money she required, she paused dramatically before naming the precise, staggering figure: $40,000, the exact sum I had saved for my down payment. I was stunned. "Bryn, that's not seed money. That's my house down payment. You know that money is for my future." "Your future," she scoffed. "Your future is just spreadsheets. My future is culture. And besides, you can always earn more. Mom says you're already saving up again. That money has been sitting there for years. It's practically dormant. It should be used for something important." Her demand wasn't just selfish. It was a clear demonstration that she believed my life's efforts were merely a resource pool for her greater purpose. The fact that she was demanding the full amount, backed by my mother's silent consent, meant the battle lines had been drawn. The family expected me to sacrifice my long-awaited independence for Bryn's transient ambition. The good news about Adam's proposal brought none of the joy I had expected when I finally shared it with my family. Adam Cole proposed during a weekend trip to the coast. It was perfect, intimate, and entirely focused on our future together, a future that involved a mortgage and a life free from the Vance Antique Shop's debts. When I called St. Louis with the news, my mother Janice responded with a flat, "That's nice, Aubrey. I hope he knows how busy you are." There was no excitement, no congratulations, only a calculated shift in focus. The very next day, the real agenda began. "Aubrey, your father and I need to talk to you about the shop roof," Janice said, her voice dropping into a tone reserved only for catastrophic financial crises. "It's leaking badly." One leak went right through the priceless 18th century French desk. "We need emergency repairs. It's going to cost us at least $5,000. I felt the familiar crushing weight return. Every time I reached a personal milestone, they would counter with an immediate, urgent financial demand to anchor me back. I was supposed to be planning a wedding, but I was instead being asked to pay for a structural failure that had been ignored for years. Then my sister Bryn piled on the pressure. She flew in from New York unannounced and set up camp in my Dallas apartment, insisting we needed to have a grown-up financial meeting. "We are running out of time for my gallery launch," Bryn stated, pacing my living room like a CEO. "That $40,000 you have sitting in that account is meant to be an investment in the family's name, Aubrey, the Vance name. You just need to sign off on the withdrawal." I stood my ground, clutching the small velvet ring box tightly in my pocket. "No, Bryn. That money is the down payment for Adam and me. It's the roof over our heads, not the shop's. I will send you the $5,000 for the roof repair as a loan to the shop, but the $40,000 is off limits. Final answer." Bryn's reaction was explosive. She threw her hands up, the performance escalating instantly. "The shop needs more than a repair loan, Aubrey. The shop is our heritage. You're choosing some sterile apartment over our family's history and my destiny as an artist. You're selfish. You always were." The emotional warfare reached its peak when my mother Janice got back on the phone, leveraging Bryn's distress against me. "Bryn is devastated, Aubrey." Janice sighed dramatically. "She hasn't eaten all day. Do you know how much stress you're causing your poor sister? And Keith and I? We are just heartbroken that you prioritize some boy and a mortgage over the family that raised you. That money is sitting there doing nothing while we are struggling." Janice expertly used the classic guilt trip, suggesting that my financial prudence was an act of familial malice. She knew the $40,000 was the only path to my complete independence, and she was determined to make me feel morally bankrupt for even considering it. The conversation ended with me exhausted and furious, agreeing to meet them for the infamous Sunday dinner. I knew the dinner was a trap, a final public confrontation orchestrated to pressure me into signing over the money right in front of Adam. I looked at Bryn, who was shaking with the baseball bat in her hand, and I knew the moment for boundaries had finally arrived. The Sunday dinner was excruciatingly formal. Adam was placed directly opposite my mother Janice, who used the entire appetizer course to list the various virtues of true artists versus corporate drones. My father Keith kept glancing nervously from Bryn to me, clearly hoping I would just cave and write the check. When Bryn launched into her scripted monologue about her virtual gallery, she made it sound like the fate of St. Louis's cultural scene depended entirely on my $40,000 down payment fund. "I need that money this week, Aubrey." Bryn finished staring me down. "We need to put the deposit down on the developers or the whole vision collapses." I took a slow, deliberate breath. This was it. The moment I chose my life over theirs. "I already told you, Bryn." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I sent $5,000 for the roof repair as a loan to the shop, not a gift. But the $40,000 is not available. It's earmarked for my and Adam's future, and I am done funding your hobbies." The word hobbies shattered her composure. Bryn's face instantly twisted into the mask of uncontrolled fury I had glimpsed only in childhood tantrums. "It's not a hobby, it's my life. You don't deserve that money." That's when she threw the ceramic mug narrowly missing my head and stormed into the garage. The air hung thick, suffocating. Adam started to rise, but Janice, my mother, grabbed his arm and whispered urgently, "Stay out of it, Adam. She's just being dramatic." Bryn returned, holding the metallic bat. This was the moment I described in part 1, but seeing it up close, the raw, unhinged intent in her eyes was chilling. "I'll make you sign it over," she shrieked, swinging the bat as if aiming for the jugular of the dining table itself. Adam pulled me away, shouting at Bryn to drop the weapon. As the chaotic scene unfolded, I finally realized that my father Keith wasn't just standing by. He was blocking the kitchen door, preventing anyone from truly intervening. They were all in it. The silence, the threats, the obstruction, it was a coordinated, violent ambush. When Bryn finally paused, panting, I stepped around Adam, my eyes locked on hers. "You've lost Bryn, and you just lost me completely." We grabbed our bags and drove straight to the nearest bank branch that held the joint savings account. I walked up to the counter, Adam standing beside me, ready to close the account and transfer the remaining balance. The teller printed the statement. I looked at the number, expecting $40,000 and the few $100s I had sent for the roof repair minus the loan. The balance read $124.78. The money was gone. All of it. The $40,000 I had saved for 5 years, my ticket to freedom, was wiped out. My hands trembled as I looked at the transaction history. The withdrawal was made 10 days earlier, an over-the-counter transaction signed by Janice Vance. I had agreed to let her manage the account but not to liquidate it. Suddenly, Bryn's desperate rage made sick sense. She wasn't fighting for the money, she was fighting because she knew it was already gone, and my denial meant she would be exposed. My parents hadn't been pressuring me to give the money. They were pressuring me to forgive the theft. The $124.78 balance confirmation on that bank statement hit me harder than Bryn's baseball bat could have. The shock was paralyzing, instantly replacing my fury with cold, clear betrayal. Adam, standing beside me at the bank, was the first to react. "Aubrey, this is theft. Your mother liquidated your down payment fund. We need to call the police." "Not yet." I managed my voice raw. I needed answers, not lawyers. We drove back to the hotel and I immediately placed a call to my parents' landline in St. Louis. My father, Keith Vance, answered, his voice thick with fake concern. "Aubrey, are you okay? Did Bryn hurt you? That temper of hers? I swear." Keith began falling into the predictable pattern of blaming the perpetrator while ignoring his own complicity. I cut him off, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "Stop, Dad. We're past the theatrics. The $40,000 is gone. Janice Vance withdrew it 10 days ago. Tell me where it went." There was a long, terrible silence on the line. Then I heard the faint rustle of the receiver being handed over. My mother, Janice, took the call. Her voice was perfectly composed, almost apologetic, yet utterly unyielding. "Oh, Aubrey," Janice sighed. "I was hoping we could talk about this gently. Yes, I took it. It was urgent." "Urgent? This was my down payment. You stole my future? Was it for Bryn's virtual art gallery?" Janice paused, the pause heavy with hidden information. "No, darling. It wasn't for the gallery. It was for her debt. Bryn had accrued a substantial gambling debt. She was getting threats. They were talking about coming to the shop." The truth dropped like a hammer. Bryn wasn't just a spoiled artist. She was a liability sinking into a dangerous underworld. And my parents, Keith and Janice, had chosen to protect their golden child from the consequences by sacrificing my stability. "And you thought stealing my money was the solution." I challenged, my hands clenching into fists. "We had no choice," Janice exclaimed, her composure finally cracking. "We are her parents. We protect her. And truthfully, Aubrey, we felt that $40,000 was sitting idle. You can make it back so quickly. Bryn cannot. She's too fragile to handle this kind of pressure. Fragile? I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. She just swung a baseball bat at me, and you stood there and watched. You prioritized protecting her reputation from gambling collectors over protecting me from physical harm. You are complicit in her violence, and you are complicit in this theft. Don't talk about the money like that, Janice warned, her voice hardening with the true core of her entitlement. It was always our money, Aubrey. You were simply the vehicle that earned it. We let you hold it for us. That single sentence. It was always our money was the final devastating piece of the puzzle. It wasn't about love, debt, or art. It was about ownership. I was not their daughter. I was their asset, their endless financial supply. They never intended for me to leave their control. I hung up without another word. I looked at Adam, who silently handed me the bank statement. That piece of paper was not just proof of theft. It was my formal severance notice from the Vance family.